Thanks to everyone for coming out to this special birthday bash edition of our group author readings. This event is brought to you by Strong Women at Strange Worlds, which is a group of authors supporting authors. This month we are turning 2 years old. Woohoo! Thank you to everyone who has supported us and helped us reach this milestone. Our mission is to elevate the voices of women and other underrepresented gender identity authors of science fiction, fantasy, and horror through events like our bi-monthly virtual quick read sessions. You can find out more about Strong Women, Strange Worlds in the handout we've provided in the chat and by visiting our website, strongwomenstrangeworlds.weebly.com. I'd also like to take a moment to thank those of you who have made a tip jar donation. Thank you. We appreciate you so much. I am your host, Missy Jane, and you can find more about me in the provided handout as well. Please note that recording of this session by the audience is not allowed, and recording of electronic communications, including Zoom meetings and webinars without permission, is illegal. Our first event today is a special Strong Women at Strange Worlds edition of Bluff the Audience. In this event, I will read part of a scene from one of the panelists' books, but you won't know which book or author it's from. Our 5 author panelists will then each read an alternate version of the scene ending. 4 of the endings will be fake, created by the author reading it for this event, and 1 will be the real ending from the book. It's up to you, the audience, to determine which version is the real one. Bonus points if you can identify which author's book the scene is from. We'll be presenting 5 scenes total, 1 from each author, but watch out. The authors are out to trick you, and telling the real scene from the fakes might not be as easy as you might think. After the audience votes, we'll reveal which scene ending was the real one, and the author will reveal what book it's from. Let's start by introducing the author panelists we have with us today. Terri Bruce. Terri Bruce was one of Strong Women Strange Worlds co-founders, writes hard-to-classify fantasy and science fiction stories that explore the supernatural side of everyday things. She is the author of the paranormal contemporary fantasy Afterlife series, the speculative fiction short story collection Souls, and numerous short stories in various anthologies and magazines. Visit her on the web at terribruce.net. Excuse me. Elizabeth Davis. Elizabeth Davis is a second-generation writer living in Dayton, Ohio. They live there with their spouse and 2 cats, neither of which have been lost to ravenous corn mazes or sleeping serpent gods. They can be found at deadfishbooks.com when they aren't busy creating beautiful nightmares and bizarre adventures. Morgan Chalut. Morgan Chalut has been writing since she learned that anyone was allowed to do it. It didn't slow down her talking at all, but at least gave her family a break now and then. She hopes to continue to discover characters and worlds she can plot and explore and share. Vanessa MacLaren-Wray. Vanessa MacLaren-Wray writes speculative fiction exploring the challenges of communication and attachment in a complex universe. Although denying any knowledge of alien technologies or extrasolar civilizations when asked to write what she knows, Vanessa gravitates towards wormhole-based transit systems and cultural matrices only partly occupied by human beings. J.F. Garrard. J.F. Garrard is an award-winning speculative fiction writer, editor, and publisher. She is the president of Dark Helix Press, co-president for the Canadian Authors Association's Toronto branch, and deputy editor of Rice Paper magazine. Her portfolio of books and short fiction is listed on jfgarrard.com, and you can find her on Twitter at jfgarrard. Alrighty, here we go. Authors, are you ready to get started?
We're ready.
Everybody's got their mutes off.
Ready.
Okay, so we are going to start with this first scene. I'm going to read, and then the authors will read their endings, and then audience, you will put in the chat which ending you think is the correct ending. So first one is Master Vladimir. Do not be so negative. Surely you cannot be happy with the situation. Yuri took away your leadership position in the Brotherhood by force. He is not half the man as you are, and your blood does not run in him. Those are dangerous words. No matter what happens, he is still my idiot son, as I raised him from infancy. My time is almost over, and all that I possess will be given to him anyway. Coughing up phlegm, he hacked for a few minutes and spat into a metal dish one of his companions held out for him. What if I can extend your life? There must be many things you still want to accomplish. Ha! So I can suffer for many more years? No thanks. But what if I bought today? What if what I bought today is the taming sorry, we can restore your youth and health. Do you really want to face death? Kaya walked a bit closer to the bed as a few of the men took out their guns. She sat down on the mattress next to the old man. Taming sorry, he snorted. I have looked for this Karis all my life. What makes you think this one is the real thing? But it is a very interesting proposal. What do I have to give you in return? Why me? I am sure there are others who have more power than me. I am playing a chess game right now, and I don't have any pieces. If you can be my sponsor, I will help you win back your BRAVTA leadership position as well as the global one in a year's time. You are the chosen one, as you are the last living descendant of my teacher, Baba Yaga. I promised her I would take care of her bloodline before she passed on. Vanessa, go for it.
I promised her that I would take care of her bloodline before she passed on, Kia said. And how will this preserve the bloodline? Kia's lips curled and her eyebrow quirked. Did I not mention youth and health? She slipped the long, asymmetrical dagger from its silken wrappings. Turning the point towards herself, she rested the hilt within reach of the deposed leader's bony hand. Vladimir coughed and spat again, then pushed himself higher in the bed, studying the knife without yet touching it. How came you by it, sorceress? It was no small feat. I began in the Indies, in the ancient city of Taming, as did your own searchers, but I followed a different, shall we say, womanly path. He grunted and ran one finger along the hilt, a gleaming mass of engravings that told a story not even Kia had yet fully decoded. So, a woman had it? She cast her eyes down. My methods must be my own, my Lord Vladimir. You must act for all our sakes. How else can you wrest power from the man you yourself style an idiot? Those around him see their power in his fate. The old man slid his fingers around the hilt and lifted the Karis. Almost reverently, he studied the curves along each side of the blade, tilting it to catch every detail. The blade must first be bathed in the blood of a woman. She watched his frown. It is done. I used my own blood, my lord. Now the inevitable. It is a knife. Its action requires it taste flesh. The bodyguard stepped closer. You need only scratch yourself, my lord. The blade knows its mission. Moments later, a healthy, womanly shriek shook the rafters and lifted Kia's heart. It worked. There's a reason it's called the Taming Sorry, my lady Vladimira.
All right. Elizabeth, your turn to follow up on that one. Elizabeth, you're muted.
Give me a second to scroll down to where we are. Wait. Vladimir injected all of his force, immediately rebuffed by another coughing fit. The Baba Yaga? Not just a Baba Yaga? Yes, Kia answered. With chicken head and all? Well, the chicken hut wasn't really mobile anymore. Arthritis. The mortar and pestle had to be replaced after the Battle of Stalingrad. She had one of the old Night Witch bomber planes instead. And now she's gone with them, leaving you to take her place. A moment of silence grew and then dripped down. What happened to her? A man like you should know better than to ask unnecessary questions, Kia scolded. I'm old and sentimental now. Another coughing fit interrupted him. Give me a few more minutes to enjoy it before I become young and heartless. So Baba Yaga, did she know about me? Yes, she watched you all your life through night windows and cracked mirrors. What did she say about me? That no matter what happens, that idiot child is still hers, through and through. The old man laughed. Then you know my answer then.
All right. Terri, let's hear your contribution.
I promised her that I would take care of her bloodline before she passed on. The old man coughed and spat into the metal bowl again. Go peddle crazy someplace else. We're all full here. Kia edged closer and dropped her voice. What do you have to lose at this point? You're dying, and your life until the sweet release of death is going to be long, slow, and full of indignity. She jerked her chin toward the gun-wielding bodyguards. Do you really want to have these gentlemen wiping your ass and spoon-feeding you pureed mealworms? The thicker-necked one growled, raised his gun, and took a half-step toward her. Vladimir waved him off, which set off another coughing fit. Kia waited a moment and then delivered her final bargaining chip. I can give you a son, an heir of the true blood. She shifted closer, arching her back slightly to show off her assets to best advantage. The old man wasn't so far gone as to not understand the implication. Surprise showed in his widened eyes. You are offering yourself as part of this deal? She smiled as beguilingly as she could. How better to fulfill my promise to protect the Baba's bloodline than to raise the heir myself? The old man began to laugh, a horrible, phlegm-filled chortle that went on and on. Kia's face heated. She folded her arms across her chest and sat back. Vladimir put a restraining hand on her knee. You misunderstand, my dear. He smiled a smile that might be described as fond, which was more terrifying than anything Kia had ever seen. I am pleased beyond all measure that the universe has seen fit to grant me the fulfillment of every wish, every desire. At the close of days, I find myself the inheritor of the world. Is this not both an irony and a miracle? Not entirely sure why he was suddenly so amused, Kia cautiously nodded. Does this mean you accept? Vladimir's smile widened and became something darker, more predatory. Oh yes, I accept. Kia struggled to keep her face neutral, but her inside sang with joy. The old fool, he had played right into her hands, and now she had him right where she wanted him.
All right. Morgan, spotlight's on you.
I promised her that I would take care of her bloodline before she passed on. It was a tempting proposition, to be sure. The return of his youth and health meant he would not have to allow Yuri to ruin what he had struggled to build. Tell me what I must do. He struggled to sit upright and fought down another coughing fit. To wear the taming sari, you must make a sacrifice of flesh. Vladimir eyed the men guarding him. They all shifted nervously. How much flesh must be sacrificed? It is not the amount that is important. She smiled. What do you treasure? What do you prize? Vladimir thought about it for a moment and then glanced at the guard nearest the door. He nodded and the guard disappeared. He came back a few minutes later with Yuri leading the way. Why have you summoned me? Yuri stalked toward the end of the bed, glaring at the guards and Kia, who he had never liked. I only wish to impart my final words to you, Vladimir assured him. He beckoned. Come closer, so I do not expend so many of my final breaths. Yuri sighed shortly. His boot kicked against the metal bowl Vladimir had filled with spit and phlegm and blood. He looked disgusted, but leaned closer. Vladimir reached for him almost hesitantly, and Yuri instinctively lowered himself. You cannot have what will always be mine. Yuri's expression turned to surprise as Vladimir's knife sliced across his throat and he fell to the ground. Kia smiled.
All right. Last but not least, JF.
Well, your request is bold, and those are daring promises. I confess I have heard stories of this legendary ancestors, but I did not think she was real. She must have been ancient when she died. Vladimir studied the woman closely. If you're telling me what is true, then you must have some proof for me before I commit. Smiling brightly and exposing her dazzling white teeth, Kia picked up the old man's left hand. Please, hand me the cuirass. I will do a demonstration right here. The men in the room all pointed their guns at her and spoke their protest to her request. Master Vladimir held up his hands to silence his men and sighed as he spoke. I'm a dying man and will take any risk which could help me outsmart the Grim Reaper. Taking the cuirass into her right hand, she cut her left palm, and her audience gasped as blood started soaking into the bed. She closed her eyes and muttered a few words, which caused the dagger to glow bright red. You will need to cut your left palm if you wish to experience the youth spell I've cast on the cuirass, she said to the old man, as the dagger flew magically in front of him. Vladimir's right hand trembled as he cut into his left palm, and Kia started muttering more strange words with her eyes closed. The minutes which passed seemed to last an eternity, with everyone in the bedchamber waiting with hushed breaths. Kia opened her eyes and said, What age would you like to be, sir? Vladimir, still staring at his hand, uttered, 35, I suppose. That was my happiness. Before he could finish his sentence, the sword glowed red, and in a flash his left hand was unwrinkled, youthful, and healed. Kia smiled at his astonishment and said, You and I will rule the world together, young Vladimir. We'll take back everything we have lost and more.
All right. Lots of really good endings to this excerpt. Okay, audience, it's your turn to decide which one of those was the real one. Put in the chat which author's excerpt you think finished their chapter, their page that they read from this story. If you happen to know which book it's from, put that in there as well. And you've got about a minute and a half to put your guesses in. In the meantime, I am putting in the chat let's see here. This should be a link to the goodie bag, I believe. There is also a link that I'm putting in for, I can find it. This is the link that has information about all of the authors that are participating today. So you can also take a look at that if you've already figured out who it is and put your contribution in the chat. How want to take a look at either of those links in the interim. Let's see here. Looking at the impossible. Becca, make a guess.
Vanessa. I see a vote for Vanessa.
You have a 1 in 5 chance, guys.
Yeah.
Those are good odds.
That's not bad odds. Hard to guess. Yeah, they were all great, Lindsay. You're right. They were all great. Let's see here. I think actually I wouldn't mind reading any of those books, any of the books, written with that excerpt. So let's see here. Nobody's guessing which they think is the real one. I know, Terry. They're afraid to guess. Let's see here. Okay, somebody has guessed Morgan's.
We're going to vote for JF as well.
Let's see here. We got 2 for Morgan so far, 1 for Terry. One for JF as well. Yeah. Okay. So we're doing good. I might miss some. So if y'all see them, let's see. A few more seconds. I didn't bring a snare drum for a drum roll or countdown.
I voted for the mealworms. I voted for the.
I should have recorded the Jeopardy theme song to play during this little waiting period.
Oh, we all get attacked. I see 2
I have terrible voice. 2 for JF. Okay.
I see 2 for JF.
Let's see here. At least 1 for Vanessa. Yeah. Okay, let me see here. I'm going to give it, I don't have a second hand on my watch. So when my clock says 5:25, we're going to say, will the real author please stand up? Not really, you don't have to stand up. Just reveal yourself.
I guess we'll find out who's wearing pants. Mm-hmm.
Right. Who doesn't have a cat attached to their lap? Yeah.
My dog gave up on me.
We didn't even get to see your dog. Terry's cat gave up on taking down that sheet behind her too.
Oh, she was so determined.
She was very determined. Okay, time's up. Whose story is this? Yay, it's JF. All right, which book is this from?
This is from a book called The Undead Sorceress. So that scene was actually a transvestite sorceress trying to gather an army. So that's why she was visiting the old guy who's the head of the mafia. In the freebies, in the swag bag, in the Dark Helix Press sampler, there's another chapter that's available for free.
Awesome. All right. So you get a second taste of that. And then you can go out and buy the book. Okay. We're going to move on now to the next excerpt. Once again, I'm going to read it. And then each author is going to give their contribution for the ending of the excerpt. Here we go. We're almost there. You've said that a few times now, I grimaced, recalling the climbs and scrambles I'd endured so far. We need to go quiet from here. We're close to where Andus is waiting. I followed my brother through the woods, not complaining aloud, just in my head. Timon led me along a faint game trail, dodging through a stand of tightly spaced conifers. The forest floor silenced our footsteps completely, a deep mat of pine needles, a mat as old as the firs towering above us, a scattering of low green plants dotted the carpet of needles, catching the westering sun like little green candles spread out through the forest. Timon halted and gave a fair imitation of a jay's call. Another jay answered. Timon checked his bearings, then headed down to a spot where the ground rose slightly before a sharp drop-off. We crept along together like boys sneaking out of our room to steal from the kitchens. Andus lay flat on the ground there, near enough to the edge to spy on his quarry, but not so close he could be seen from below. Had they spotted Redlanders? Why hadn't Timon said so then? The pair of us crawled into position on either side of Andus. Are they still there? Timon whispered, so low I could barely make out the words. Yeah, they've been making camp for the night, like you thought. Timon leaned over Andus to whisper directly at me. Mind yourself. When you see this, you're going to want to shout, maybe even scream. I fought at Never Snows. Nothing can make me scream. All right, Vanessa.
Okay. I fought at Never Snows. Nothing can make me scream. If Timon hadn't put me on guard, I would have screamed like a goat with its tail on fire. I pulled my head back and put my mouth next to Andus's ear. I've gone crazy, trooper. Tell me I've lost my mind. No, sir, he said. You're sane as sane. I pulled myself back to the edge and forced myself to lie quietly and take it in. Bears, putting up tents in the woods. I know, bears don't need tents. But they weren't bears. They were only as big as bears. Instead of thick, furry legs ending in massive paws loaded with dagger claws, their thick legs were round, bare of fur, ending in fat, bulbous feet, like a child had tried to draw a pony. The legs seemed able to bend in both directions, maybe every direction. It was difficult to tell. They flexed and straightened so quickly. I could make sense of their size, but the rest made no sense at all. They weren't like anything in this world. Instead of a proper pony's neck and head, they had a lumpy stub of a torso attached at the front, with a head on top like a smoothed-off boulder, and stuck on the sides below the head were not arms, but snakes whipping out from their shoulders, big snakes, little snakes wriggling at their ends, like and yet very unlike fingers. My heart stopped right then. Without its incessant pounding, I could hear everything coming together in my head. This was what my father saw. These were the scouts he wanted to report. We need to capture one, find out what they're up to, where they've come from.
All right. Elizabeth, unmute, please, and read us your contribution.
Sorry, was too busy posting snarky comments in the chat. I fought at Never Snows. Nothing can make me scream. I was wrong. So very wrong. I stuffed my fist in my mouth to keep the muffled scream buried in our hiding spot secret. They weren't Redlanders. That was for certain. They resembled the love child of a drunk knight betraying a tarantula and a centipede that was then fed growth hormones to reach the size of humans. What made it worse was their gear. Two of them were setting up pink tents decorated with cartoon cats. Another set up a roasting pit for oversized marshmallows. Three of them were eagerly clicking to each other while airing out bright-colored polka-dotted sleeping bags. Andus, are you insane? I hissed. How are you planning on scaring something like that? A few spooky noises in the woods? A scary shadow puppet play? A masked monster? Something better than all that, Andus smugly answered, letting me know that that was all he was going to say for now. Timon, back me up here. Even if we managed to scare them off, what would it be all for? I don't want anything that's been touched by all those limbs. Look at the white one. My eyes followed his gaze to a white one off in the corner, unpacking a sparkly purple bag. Things came out that I assumed were gear for cooking or grooming or whatever freaky desires not spider people have. But then I saw it, a clear bag filled with distinctive red and green leaves. Damn, I whispered. That's enough nitro weed to actually make this worth it.
All right, Terri, give us yours.
I thought it never snows. Nothing can make me scream. I strained my eyes in the fading light, but couldn't make out any signs of an encampment. No tents, no cooking fires. What could possibly be so horrifying that Timon thought I'd shame myself by crying out? Andus gestured to catch my and Timon's attention and then pointed to a worn track down a gentle incline, half hidden by some fallen logs and a straggly bush. Laboriously, we inched forward on our bellies like snakes, slithering through the pine needles and underbrush. I held my breath, my body tense, my mind alert for any sign we were discovered. Every rustle of the thick pine carpeting sounded like a cascade of brass pots tossed down a set of stone steps to my heightened senses, and the seconds passed like long, slow minutes, each one an eternity. Closer, closer we edged, stalking the unknown quarry. Redlanders? Something worse? What could be worse than Redlanders? Marauders? Even scenes of extreme depravity carried out by the worst of their kind, such as were told in bardic song and the stories of traveling mercenaries, were hardly likely to make me cry out in horror. I had seen dismemberments, disembowelings, the butchering of children like hogs at market day. There were no worse horrors in this world than those I had already seen. Despite my bravado, a shiver coursed down my spine. There were other horrors, though, horrors not of this world. Is that what awaited us in the clearing ahead? We landed with 3 soft thumps into a pile of soft moss hidden behind a large mushroom-dotted log. We collected ourselves, caught our breath, readied ourselves to spring. Andus brought a finger to his lips, pointed over the log, and then held up 3 fingers to give us a count. We nodded our readiness, and Andus folded down 1 finger, then a second, and then the third. We rose to our feet as one, swift and silent, and I froze. A cry like the squeal of a terrified pig was wrenched from deep inside me. There, dappled by the fading last rays of the day's sun, was a pair of the cutest, fluffiest, gently hued pink bunny rabbits I had ever seen.
All right, Morgan, your turn.
I thought it never snows. Nothing can make me scream. Still, a shiver ran through me. The figures working around the tents were tiny at this distance, like ants, but far more dangerous. My mind skipped over the Redlanders with them, as I knew it would. Such creatures should not exist on this plane, and yet... I took a deep breath and forced myself to see through the haze of disguise. Nausea filled my stomach, and a dizzying pressure seemed to push against my eyes. No one sees Redlanders the same way, but they always hurt to look at. I knew I'd have nightmares the next few nights. Timon and Andus looked no better than I felt, and I wondered what horrors they saw in the creatures. I saw Andus frowning with more than disgust. "What is it?" I asked. He shook his head, but answered, "There's too many of them." "They always come in force," Timon said, with hope in his tone. "It's been 10 years. We beat them soundly last time." "Some of us more than others," I jabbed. Timon glared across at me. He was sore that I'd run off to fight It Never Snows, and he had been forced to remain behind to mind the household, though the memories I carried sometimes made me wish our places had been reversed. "No," Andus said slowly, "it's not that." His eyes scanned in that unfocused way you had to use around Redlanders to keep sane. "This is an occupying force." "Occupying?" I asked. "You think they're here for more than just slaves and crops?" A sound of cracking branches from behind made us all spin around. A grinning soldier stood there, broken twig in hand, to show he hadn't had to give warning. Worse was the distortion around him that showed that we were thoroughly surrounded.
All right, JF, again, last but not least.
I thought it never snows. Nothing can make me scream. Despite the afternoon sun warming our backs, I shivered at the sight in front of me. At Never Snows, we fought a dozen giants, the size of the tallest trees, to stop them from trampling and destroying the villages in the Notera Empire. A dozen of these smiling humanoid monstrosities had taken out hundreds of men before they were stopped. To slay these giants, the Redlander mage which controlled them had to be destroyed. Timon had done the honors of thrusting his sword through the back of the Redlander, while I distracted the enemy by creating fog on the battlefield with my water magic. Upon inspection of the giant corpses, we discovered they all had a piece of the stone of Riva in them from caves that were cursed by the Blue Witch. I wept when I saw my father lie among them, his eyes glassy, reflecting the blood-red sky. He had gone off with the hunting party to search for the Blue Witch over a year ago, and now he returned home as a brain-dead giant. We're going to have to stop them, Timon said flatly. Last time one Redlander almost took out the Notera Empire. Here's at least 6 of them. If they leave with their slave giants, we're all doomed. Furrowing my brows, I took in the scene before me. Each Redlander was speaking to a dozen giants with blank looks on their faces, lined up in a row. It was obvious the Redlanders were the commanders preparing the giants for another attack. Was Katrina part of the giant squad? The thought of my sister being turned into a killing machine filled my heart with dread. As much as I found her annoying, I didn't want her dead. I squinted, trying to see if any of the giants had long black hair or had a circular tattoo with thorns on their hand matching mine. Andus whispered, "Make the fog. I'm going to get the arrows ready." I nodded and closed my eyes. Taking a deep breath, I put my hands together to pull water molecules towards me. Once I dissipated the fog, Timon and I would run onto the battlefield to face the Redlanders while Andus covered for us with his arrows. May the gods be on our side.
Excellent. All right, audience, it's your turn to go ahead and put your guess in the chat. Personally, I am hoping it's the bunny rabbits. I'm hoping it's Terri's, but let us know what you think. And I want to also put a disclaimer out there that sometimes I mispronounce my own character's names, so there's a good chance I'm mispronouncing names here. So don't use me as a source of the definitive source on the pronunciation of any of the characters' names in these excerpts.
Look, we all do the writing thing. We don't so much do the,
The pronunciation thing.
way more embarrassing when you make up words and then you're like, ugh, I'm supposed to know.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I've done that too. All right, let's see where the votes are going so far. Yeah, no mealworms this time. But bunny rabbits, we had bunny rabbits and snakes. And what else did we have there? Let's see here. Morgan, you're winning, it looks like, on this one. Let's see. Oh, Elizabeth's got a vote. Let's see here. If I missed, I'm going to scroll back up. Let's see here. Yeah, it looks like Morgan in the lead for this one so far. I am going to go ahead and post the link for the swag bag again. But keep putting in your votes for a few more seconds. Unless everybody thinks it's Morgan's. We'll see. Morgan. No one else liked the bunny rabbits like I did, I guess. Sorry, Terri.
I mean, I am a fan of rabbits.
Yeah.
But they're
3 different rabbits right now.
Fluffy.
Of course, in a story like this, you may have been better to go. I'm going to age myself here. Say if you had gone with the killer rabbits, the Monty Python killer rabbits.
I made a reference to that in the chat asking if they had lots of sharp teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't yet close enough to tell. They may in fact have blood dripping.
He can leap about. He can jump about. Look at the bones.
Yes, Vanessa, pink is the scariest color of all. You're absolutely right.
I'm sorry, I can't mention Monty Python the Holy Grail without mentioning that every time that I watch an episode of Babylon 5, they have, that little intro of the Last of the Babylon stations. So I go, and then the fourth one burned color fire and then went down the swamp.
Yeah. My kids can quote that movie just as well as I can. It's pretty funny.
Well, you can always go with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, of course, once more with feeling. It may be bunnies,
Lots of good quotes. Okay, I think we've got the votes in. Morgan, you are the leading contender. Is this your story?
In fact, it is not my story.
Oh! Okay, will the real author please stand up, metaphorically? Whose story is it?
I'm waiting for Terri. No!
Not Terri's?
It must be Penelope's.
Did we have an extra story?
No. This is Missy, you should have the key. Where did I have the key too? Somebody forgot what story.
I think someone can remember right
Did someone forget whose their story is?
Story number 2.
Yeah.
I will say it's not mine
Vanessa.
because It's Vanessa.
It's Vanessa's.
Vanessa, did you forget your story?
I was playing in the chat and not paying attention.
Oh.
Yes, that's fine.
I was going to vote for Vanessa.
It is this. Yeah, no.
Yay!
Yes.
Okay.
Shadows of Insurrection, which is coming out next week. So
Awesome.
Wow.
sorry, I was having fun in chat,
Oh, there's the dog. Yay. Okay.
but I
Really?
would have voted for the bunnies.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I
would
like
totally
bunnies.
have gone for the bunnies. But
Collab
I
for the
knew
next one.
everyone. Or Morgan's. If Terry hadn't been here, I would have been Morgan. So she would have had a sweep.
I get it.
I was going to say, do the bunnies hang out with the not spider people?
Maybe. Which one was the non-spider people? Was that Morgan's?
That was
Elizabeth did the giants. That was so cool because the original, of course, is giant bear-like creatures building tents in the woods, and she came in with giant spiders putting up tents in the woods.
They're spider centipedes.
I was like, oh, wait a minute, is that must be the real one?
That's funny. Okay, really quick, just a quick reminder for those who came in late. In the upper right corner of your Zoom controls, you will see a view button. If you click that, you can change the layout of the Zoom screen to show the speaker view. Additionally, please select the chat option to see the chat box and the links we're posting to vote for the real story and to interact with other audience members. Lastly, don't forget we have a digital swag bag for all of you with free books, the link to which you can find in the chat. I've already posted a couple of times. I will keep posting it. We need to get on to the next scene. All right. This is the third one. Irene Dumpy opened her eyes. Oh, crap. Everything looks strangely familiar. The carpeting, the old-fashioned lamps, the twin beds with their faded and worn coverlets. She turned in place, taking everything in, her heart sinking. She was dead, and this was the afterlife, only this didn't look like any version of the afterlife she'd ever heard of. In fact, it looked a lot like the hotel room she supposedly just left back on Earth when she'd stepped into the warm and welcoming white light that formed the tunnel to the great beyond. She looked down, taking stock of her person. Well, at least she seemed to be all here. 2 arms, 2 legs. She was still wearing what she died in, the candy apple red spaghetti strapped thigh-high cocktail dress and 3-inch strappy slingback shoes she'd worn, or thigh-length, cocktail dress that she'd worn clubbing. To this ensemble had been added an olive green man's suit coat, courtesy of Jonah, who'd have borrowed one from his dad to give to Irene. Same clothes, same room. Her heart sank. She hadn't actually made it to the other side. She was still stuck on Earth. As she studied the room, however, fine details began to come into focus. The floor lamp was missing. The curtains were a different color. The desk wasn't in the same place. In fact, the more she looked around, the more she realized this was not the same room she had inhabited in the land of the living. So where the hell was she? All right, Vanessa, what do you think? Where was she?
Well, so where the am I muted? No, good. Where the hell was she? Well, it certainly wasn't heaven. On the off chance it might pay off, Irene pulled open the drawers in the rickety old dresser. Empty. She didn't expect anything, but checked the closet anyhow. Only an ineptly folded blanket on the high shelf. Oh well, time to check the place out. She opened the door. Tried to, anyhow. Her hand glided right through the doorknob. It made all the bones ache with cold. She squared her shoulders, took an insubstantial ghost breath. Why do I breathe? I'm dead. Dead, dead, dead. Then she closed her eyes, another meaningless living world move, and walked through the door. It felt like breaking every bone in her body, but she didn't have a body, not really, only a memory of a body that couldn't walk through doors. Where was Jonah now? Could he find her here, wherever here was? Here, forever, after all. Her imagined shoulders shook, and she started to laugh. It came out wild, hysterical, the laughter of a ghost at the end of the world, haunting a castle above a windswept sea. But she wasn't in a Gothic castle. She was in yet another seedy old hotel. At least she didn't have to blow her nose and dry her eyes after the outburst. She made it down the vomit green carpeted stairs and to the front door. The glazed windows let in light, but no image of the exterior. She closed her eyes again and stepped through. Wind buffeted her clothing, but her dead body ignored what she'd otherwise have felt as icy cold. It smelled strange, of rot and salt and... Was that fish? Irene opened her eyes. Brilliant sunlight blazed from a cloud-studded sky, puffy shadows coasting over the sea below, the wine-dark sea. The phrase struck her from nowhere. The water wasn't red, but the scene was intoxicating. A seagull hurtled by, gliding on the updraft from the cliff. She followed its exultant flight, and the laugh that came filled her with joy. Maybe this is heaven, after all.
You're muted, Missy.
Sorry, Elizabeth, it's your turn. Don't forget to unmute.
I was too busy talking about Gothic castles in the chat. But at least I can recognize my own story. So where the hell was she? Irene picked up her suitcase, deciding not to rifle through it to see what else was in the suitcase. That was probably not really her suitcase. She would need to figure out her situation before deciding what was useful. What was strange was how it felt so real on her fingers, the worn fox leather where her fingers had always grasped it. The wooden door with its loose doorknob threatening to get stuck as she opened it. What she saw outside was enough to convince her that she was dead, even as the cold air assaulted her lungs. Where there should have been a hallway, there was a black void, and a line of people in outfits she had never seen before, some in outfits that had only been seen in museums and old photos, some modern. Some people looked like her, easily mistaken for alive, others not so much, such as the man carrying his own head. Irene picked an older, olive-skinned lady dressing in deep purple robes to approach, whose death seemed to have been more peaceful than the others around her. "Excuse me, but is this the other side?" "Yes and no," the woman said, as if this question was commonplace. "This isn't the final place or even the trying ground for your particular gods. This is like a storage room for souls. A waiting room is how some people call it." Irene looked at the line of people stretching past her vision. "It seems to be a rather slow process. How long have you been waiting?" "Oh, for thousands of years. I'm waiting ever since the clerk in charge went on a coffee break."
All right, Terri, let's hear yours.
So where the hell was she? "Hello?" she called, still turning in a circle, growing more uneasy by the minute. Where was everyone? She couldn't be alone, could she? Surely there had to be other people, dead people about. She listened hard, looking for any signs of life beyond the empty room's four walls. Somehow, though, she knew it was fruitless. She was alone. She could sense it. The utter completeness of the silence washed over her, thick and heavy like a shroud. A chill scuttled down her spine. She crossed to the door in 3 strides and pulled it open. The aimless, loitering ghosts that she expected to see populating the hallway of the hotel's 13th floor were gone. There was only a deep, vast silence. No muffled footsteps, no voices, no doors opening and closing, nothing. "Hello?" she called again, though the hallway was obviously empty. She headed for the stairs, breaking into a run as her heart thundered in her ears. She slammed open the door to the stairwell and bolted down the stairs, the sound of her heels on the metal and concrete reverberating in the enclosed space. She hardly paused as she reached the last stair and yanked open the door. She exploded into the lobby, only to come immediately to a dead stop. The lobby had a ghostly, neglected air of faded opulence and splendor. Crystal chandeliers, marble floor, brass and gold fixtures, and the reassuring presence of a lone bellboy manning the front desk. Irene tried to catch her breath and shake off the panic. "You idiot," she chided herself. "What the hell is wrong with you? Of course you're not alone. It's not like you're the only person who ever died." She smoothed down her dress as her eyes roved over her surroundings. So, this is the afterlife.
Morgan, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted again. Go for it.
So where the hell was she? The door opened and she spun in surprise. "A knock is typically considered polite," she snapped. A short and stocky man with long, dirty blonde hair came inside, dragging a heavy suitcase that had seen better days. The corners were scuffed and dented, one was torn, and the color had faded to almost blue or almost green, but more gray than anything. He didn't look up at Irene's words. "Hello?" she demanded, hands on her cocked-out hip. He only kept doing what he was doing, wrestling the suitcase up onto the bed. She walked closer and could smell his strong, almost too strong, aftershave. "Hello?" she said again, tentative. "So I'm a ghost, I guess." She looked down at her clubbing outfit again, poked out a heel to more closely examine the 3-inch heels, and rubbed a nervous hand down the suit coat. "If this is what I have to wear for eternity, I guess I can live with that." She laughed at the inadvertent joke. The door had closed behind the man when he'd come in, but she went to it now. Try to push through or give the handle a go? What the hell, why not? She put a hand up to the door and tried to walk through it. Her knuckles scraped slightly, and she was very glad she hadn't started with her face. Damn! She tried the handle, but it wouldn't turn either. Not like it was locked, but like it was glued in place. Or concrete. She stepped back and put her hands on her hips again, glaring like the door itself had perpetrated this injustice. "What is the point of being a ghost if you can't do ghost things?" she asked it petulantly. "You're not a ghost," the man said behind her. She spun to see him pointing some kind of science fiction gun-looking contraption at her. "You're just an echo, a memory, and you can't stay."
All right. JF, let's hear yours.
So where the hell was she? The rattling of the doorknob startled her. She looked around frantically for a weapon and, not finding any, decided to step behind the curtains. "Irene, darling?" The soft, gentle voice of a man made her peek from behind the curtains. "Jonah, is that you?" She ran towards him with open arms. His face twisted into an expression of horror, and he held his arms out, blocking her from touching him. "Girl, get away, please!" Irene stopped and looked closely at Jonah. His short dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and handsome face looked the same. However, his clothes were awfully flashy, a rainbow sequin jacket on top of a white satin shirt. Her Jonah was a geeky otaku accountant with no fashion sense who wore black shirts and jeans all the time. Who was this person? "Girl, I know what you're thinking. You died in a car crash a year ago, and it took me a year to track down a priestess who could raise the dead." Jonah circled her, taking in her clothing. "A candy-appled red dress with a green olive jacket? What happened to you? I thought you hated dresses. Did you go to hell?" "What? No." She gulped and took a deep breath to push down feelings of disbelief and disappointment that the love of her life looked disgusted at her. "I was hit by a car, and you put your dad's jacket around me before I died. You said you would wait for me in the next life. Where are we?" "Oh, right. Of course I said that. Oh, I almost forgot about that stuff." Irene stared at Jonah. Was it her imagination, or does his face begin to flicker? She looked around the room, which was bare of any possible weapons, cursing the floor lamp, which was the only workable weapon, and it was missing. As she rambled on about how much she loved the colors in the room, causing Jonah's face to smile in agreement, she reached down with her right hand and took off her heels. Before he could say anything, she smashed her heel into his neck. Instantly, Jonah's flesh melted away, and a giant withering earthworm let out a loud shriek. It was going to be a long night.
I'm almost sad that we already know that this is not yours because you already revealed your story. Okay, we've got to move along quickly because we're running out of time. So, audience, please put your guesses in there. I'm queuing up the next excerpt, the next scene. We need to know. Everyone, jump on into the chat and let us know whose story do you think this is. All right, Elizabeth's got a vote. I want JF's version too, Terri. Terry's got a couple of votes. Anne says that she knows this one. All right, Anne. So whose is it? Let's see here. Vanessa. All right, come on. Terri. Okay, Terri, you're winning. Is it your story?
It is my story. I got too obvious. Yeah, that is from Thereafter, the second book in my Afterlife series, where Irene has finally made it to the other side and is confused about where she is. Because, yeah, is it heaven or is it hell? It could be either.
Or neither.
Awesome. All right. Like I said, I'm sorry we're moving on a little quickly here at the end. Let me read the next scene. It was approaching noon when they came to the promised stream in Nuncio's neat camp with a bundle of smoked fish hanging from the tree, a pit surrounded with rocks for a large fire, and a small tent. They tied the horses within range of grazing and stretched or paced according to their needs. Nuncio pointed out a few fallen logs and said, You bring those forward for sitting. Thale and Kara reluctantly did as directed, bringing them closer to the fire pit. Whitman studied the camp, no doubt gleaning information aplenty despite its neat sparsity. Now you see my camp. You see my fish. Let me hear your names. Nuncio's Manzayan accent hadn't faded in the years since he had left his home. Manizayan, I'm sorry. They introduced themselves quickly, and Nuncio stared deeply at each of them to memorize their features. I guess this means you're alone, Annette gestures at the small tent. Does it? Nuncio cocked his head at her. He winked at Donovan and said, the fish are small, but they are plenty, and I have a net out for more if you eat all of my catch. You, fetch the bag from the tent. Whitman started at the shout, but did as asked, slinging the heavy bundle to lean against the log. Nuncio pulled out several closed parcels and handed them to Whitman, naming them as they came. Figs, eggs, and oats, cheese, of goat, bread. He withdrew 2 small jars of bread liquid. Wine. Everyone sit. Lady, fetch us some meat or put away the bow. You are guests, and I want to hear your tale. Truth with a weapon in hand is no truth at all. All right. Vanessa, let's hear your ending to this excerpt.
Okay. Truth with a weapon in hand is no truth at all. Annette, instead, shouldered her weapon and settled on one of the logs. I'm no hunter, Nuncio, and it's a good host lets his guests take comfort where they may. Her refusal didn't cool his mood. He nestled the first jar of wine into her hand. Then you must give us your assessment of this vintage. It was claimed to be of value, but I'm a soft mark. Donovan shot a glance to Whitman, who'd caught the mild allusion to the art of the confidence trickster. The younger man quirked an eyebrow in the direction of the woods. Donovan unslung his pack and delved into it. Flatbread, anyone? They'll serve as plates for our host's fine repast. He made a great show of passing the edible platters and waved Kara and Thiel over to do the same with the figs and cheese and eggs. Whitman faded into the shadows. Typical. Let him exercise his suspicions. To Donovan, the setting spoke of an old con, but one with no real threat to it. Nuncio had fish enough for everyone, and the net lay ready to hand if not. The rest, though, was hardly enough for the round-bodied fellow himself. I know this game, and I don't mind it at all. Thiel, when you've done there, haven't you a supply of crackers that would do well with the goat cheese? And Annette, if you can manage without the bow for a moment, I put the dried fruit in your pack last time we reorganized supplies. Soon enough, the party had settled to a veritable feast, the old Manassian seed for the meal having served its purpose in emptying everyone else's packs as well. He placed himself beside Donovan in the circle. I see you've done this before, lad. Thank you kindly. Donovan nodded, his mouth too full of goat cheese and crackers to speak. Nuncio nudged Donovan's knee with one elbow. Your partner's still circling the camp. Shouldn't you call him in? A shadow bloomed in Donovan's chest. He's been too long. I'll go in a moment. Relieve him. He rolled the fruit in the remains of his bread and dodged out into the darkness.
All right. NC. All right, Elizabeth, let's hear your NC.
Okay. Truth with a weapon in hand is no truth at all. You will have to forgive her, Donovan said. You've had a dangerous and long day. Dangerous? Nuncio asked. Did you run into the orcs on your travels, I take it? Yes, a bloodhands raiding party, Seal explained. I'm surprised they bothered you. Do you not take this the wrong way, but your group seems a bit too bedraggled to be carrying any real booty. Well, Whitman is the one to blame for that, and Ned was cut off by an elbow from Whitman. There was a misunderstanding between him and the Bloodhands chief. Theo diplomatically explained. Yes, the sort that happens in bed, Nat muttered under her breath, getting another elbow. Nuncio raised an eyebrow in confusion. I was surprised he decided to travel through the territory at all. Well, we were escaping from the halfling caravan who were upset at us, Sierra explained. Did this also involve misunderstandings in bed? No, it's because we were technically stowaways and someone let the illusion spell lapse. Donovan had found an interesting rock sitting by his log and was now staring at it intently. Granted, we wouldn't have needed to sneak out of the city if some people had stuck to the plan, he commented, still staring at the rock. This brought tired groans from Annette and Sierra. It's all the guard's fault. If he hadn't turned around, we would have been out of the palace with no trouble. The palace? Nuncio now had 2 eyebrows raised. What were you doing in the palace? Robbing the royal treasury, Donovan said. You don't look like you're laden down with jewels and gold. We weren't after those, Annette explained as Sarah pulled something from her bag. Something round and blue, a glassy polished surface and lightning crackling in its depths. Nuncio felt sweat creep down his face at the recognition orb. This dinner is no chance encounter, is it? Nope, said Denavon. We need you, the former dread Dark Lord of Macedon, to help us save the world.
All right, Terri. Your turn.
Truth with a weapon in hand is no truth at all. Well said, Donovan replied, and seated himself on one of the logs that Theo and Kara had arranged around the fire pit. With obvious reluctance, the rest of the crew followed. Nuncio was a gracious host, parceling out the rustic and sparse provisions, and everyone took a few bites to show goodwill. There was silence for a moment as everyone chewed and swallowed, and then Nuncio raised one of the small jars of wine in salute. To new friends! He swallowed some of the ruby liquid and then passed the jar to Donovan, seated to his left. Nuncio passed the second jar to Annette, seated on his right. The jars made their way around the circle, each person taking a sip before passing it on, until they both made a complete circuit, returning to Nuncio. He set the jars in the dirt at his feet and then gestured at Whitman. Well, my friend, let me hear your tale. How did you come to be here in my woods, and why have you sought me out? Whitman cleared his throat and then opened his mouth to speak, but Annette beat him to it. We've been hired to steal something. A heavily guarded something, Theo added. And we need a master thief such as yourself as part of our team. If you help us, we will give you an equal share of the payment. The payment must be hefty for it to be worth your while to part with a sixth of it, Nuncio said with a raised eyebrow. Oh, it is, Kara said. Trust me. She opened her mouth as if to say something further, but then her expression changed to one of surprise. She reached for her throat just as a choking gurgle escaped her lips, and then she toppled sideways off the log. Whitman jumped to his feet, hand on the hilt of his sword, but then he too gasped, grabbed at his throat, and crumpled to the ground. One by one, the rest of his band followed. Nuncio stood, a smug smile adorning his lips. He searched the dead bodies until he found a scrap of parchment with the details of the heist the others had been hired to carry out. He read the details, made note of the payment terms, and then liberated a thick wad of currency from the purse secreted under Donovan's shirt. Ah, my friends, he said, surveying the ring of bodies one final time to make sure he hadn't missed anything. Never trust a Menasian when there's a lucrative contract on the line.
All right, Morgan, your turn.
Truth with a weapon in hand is no truth at all. Annette smiled thinly and unstrung her bow. She slid it into the carrying case and capped her quiver before accepting a fish off the bundle that Nuncio lowered from the tree. She seated herself comfortably between Kara and Thiel. Donovan accepted his portion and spread a napkin from Nuncio's bag across his knees. The cheese was soft and sharp, and the bread was flat and chewy, as he remembered. Nuncio always insisted on making his own rations when they had time. The cooks at the order hated him as much as they'd loved him, telling stories in the kitchen while getting under their feet. The quail eggs were very rich, but he let the figs pass him by, as they'd never agreed with his stomach. Everyone was quiet while they navigated the meal, and Donovan saw Nuncio studying each of them while they were busy with their food. He winked when he saw Donovan watching. Did Donovan ever tell you of the times I saved his life? Nuncio asked. He did not. Whitman's expression was openly curious. That is good, because I never did, and this tells me he is still no liar. Nuncio put his head back and wheezed a hoarse laugh. Donovan rolled his eyes, but was unable to stop the smile. Nuncio is from over the mountains in Manasia, as I'm sure you can tell. He came here to train at the order instead of being drafted into the army. You came to be a retriever, 8 years before me, I believe. I was assigned to him 16 years ago, and we worked together for about 5 years, 5.5. Nuncio nodded, working his jaw around a mouthful of fig, bread, and boiled egg.
All right, JF. Round it out.
Okay. Truth with a weapon in hand is no truth at all. The three children gave each other nods of agreement before placing their bows gently onto the ground behind the log they were sitting on. Nuncio pulled out a flat piece of wood which serves as a cutting board as he used a small knife to divide up the food. Pulling out 2 copper cups, he poured wine into them and gestured towards his guests to try some of the wine. But I'm not an adult yet, Whitman protested, and Annette poked him in the ribs while she kept whispering, pretend to drink. As he raised the cup and let the liquid touch his lips, Annette cleared her throat before speaking. Thank you for saving us, she said. We think the people who are shooting us with the arrows are after the same thing, the sacred chalice. Do you think you can help us with our quest? The dark-haired man raised an eyebrow at the mention of the holy treasure. I see. You are not just mere visitors to Noxus. He carefully walked up to each of them and pressed a packet of food into their hands. The sacred chalice is hidden from prying eyes, and only the bravest warriors would be able to find it. Do you know what is required for this journey? Annette nodded and twisted her hands together to keep herself from pulling her hair out. The others had more patience than her and thought that saying the same lines would once again lead to Nuncio helping them out. Just before putting on the VR goggles to enter the fantastic realm of the Nuxus, she had memorized tips on Reddit for beating the game. They would have left the game days ago until Lenny, the school bully, had modified the code, trapping them in the game along with himself. She didn't understand why he did this, but finding the sacred chalice would hopefully help them jump out of the loop they were stuck in. They had spoken to Nuncio a dozen times already, and went on a dozen unsuccessful quests, dying before collecting the treasure. Surely this time, with experience gained, they would be able to escape the game?
All right. All interesting. Okay, audience, put in your guess. I am going to be pasting the link for the handout with all of the author's information. We are moving along quickly. We are out of time, actually. So, not seeing any guesses yet. Come on, we got to know who you think that this story belongs to. Morgan, let me see, I can guess because I know. Well, Marie, if you know, tell us. We have one from Morgan so far. And if anybody's keeping track, you should know which authors have already been, who have already said. Let's see here. Yep, it's down to 2. I'm not going to say out loud. If you're not keeping track, you can just be surprised. All right, let's see here. Morgan. Okay, I gotta wrap it up quickly. So Morgan, is this one your story?
Heck yeah, it's my story, Missy. Did you like how I strategically mispronounced Manazian there?
Well, oh yeah, me too. That was strategic. My mispronunciation, totally strategic. Yeah.
Again, a word that I made up. How did you not know?
Yeah. I should have known. Okay. Last but certainly not least, we have one more excerpt. Let me go ahead and get this read out to you guys. How much do you remember from last night? The Baku gave me a disappointed look after he took me from the local jail and into his blissfully quiet limo. Not as much as I would have liked. I examined my arms covered in still healing scratches, hard to ignore since I seem to have lost my shirt. Do you at least remember the charges? I tried to remember the cop's face as I broke out of the handcuffs and tore at his flesh, as the blast of gunshots and the snap of taser charges filled my ears. I looked at the angry welts left on my skin. I wondered if they were from the bullets. Not really. The Baku looked down at his notes, paging through the papers. Is there any chance you remember why you decided to break into Mr. Stark's house? The feel of the wood as I ripped the door off its hinges, the disappointment at his empty bed, the joy of destruction as the security alarm blared. He was Celestia's ex, that one she was seeing at the night of the crash. She told me that they were fighting, that her face wasn't just hurt in the wreck. I remembered the squeeze of her hands on the bed as she told me the story after finally untying my hands. Her smile in the dark house among the smashed furniture. The way her green eyes focused on me as if I was the only thing that could sate her hunger. All right, Vanessa, finish that one off for us.
Well, I think we're way over time. We're
yes.
Mad Libs was supposed to start 10 minutes ago, and then we're going to be a half an hour late for Mad Libs.
Sorry.
I think we're going to have to wrap up. But
okay.
That was Elizabeth's story then, right? So Elizabeth,
yes.
Tell us what book that's from.
That is actually not from a book. It's from a short story, which you can find in Bards and Sages, one of their winter issues. And the short story is Fish Taku Out of Water, which I'm probably not pronouncing that word right at all.
Another one where we don't know our own pronunciations. We love it.
Yes, it's a South American monster, and I pronounce Spanish like I'm like the worst student in any Spanish class.
Okay, well, that's it. Go ahead.
Real quick, there just was going to say there does seem to be calls from the audience to have a compilation of all the scenes put together. So
we could do that. We can make that happen.
Yeah,
okay.
That's something I imagine would follow up in email, but I wanted to have that in the front of your mind before we head off from the segment.
All right. Well, I did also post the link of the handout that has all of the authors' information. That is it for Bluff the Audience.